Hey guys, welcome back to Unleashed, and I hope you had a great Labor Day weekend. I know I did. Um, hey, if you hear any music going on this morning, my neighbor is still enjoying Labor Day weekend. He had his music playing behind the house all weekend long, but luckily it was like classic rock, so I was pretty cool with it. He's been out grilling and just having a ball all weekend. You know what? Celebrate your freedoms. It's what a great weekend to be able to be out. It was gorgeous weather here in central Indiana, and I hope it was where you were too. Um, this weekend we had a lot of fun. We did some. I grilled out some hamburgers and some hot dogs and stuff like that. But then on was it Sunday or Saturday? Stacy and I went to go see the new movie Reagan, and I don't know why. So many of the critics are giving this movie not good ratings. I thought it was awesome. Everybody I know that went to see it said this was an incredible movie. Everyone really needs to see this movie. I totally agree. I'm going to tell you a little bit more about the Reagan movie, and while I'm going to continue to keep saying the word Reagan in this podcast, it's kind of funny. But it was an awesome movie. When we were done watching the movie, we went to dinner maybe a quarter of a mile away. We were sitting outside, just really enjoying our time together on our date night. And she looks at me, Stacy goes, "Who was the best president in your lifetime?" And I said, without a doubt, it was Ronald Reagan. I think everybody can look in their lifetime and pick for whatever reasons why someone meant something to you. And I can tell you this, Reagan to me was the best president because he governed with a real care about people. You could hear it in the stories he would tell, the way he would talk to people, but he had a real strength about him. And we're going to unpack a little bit of that as we get going today. What was really cool, though, was, as I was watching the movie, we were picking out different parts that both of us really, really liked. And every now and then I'd see something that would remind me of something, going back. And I can remember when Reagan came into office. Carter had been the president before that, whether you liked him or not. To me, he was strong on some things, weak in other things. But the Iranians had taken the Americans hostage, and I forget how many there were. There was hundreds of hostages. But as soon as Reagan came in, they knew he meant business. And it was on January 20th, they released the hostages. He came into office, and that day, man, they're released. And that is what happens when you rule with peace through strength. When a person who is willing to keep their word, and the way he was able to talk to some of these world leaders, just to be able to relate to them, to go for walks sometimes with a leader away from everybody else, just so they could relate to one another. But at the same time, he was able to say, whatever needs to happen here, this is your ball in your court right now. So be careful, because we will follow through with what we say. And we need that again. We desperately need that in our country again. So Reagan, for me, no matter what, he was the best president that I can remember, growing up. Neat thing happened back, must have been around what year was it, 88 maybe? I was traveling with a singing group called One. At the time we had been singing backup for Sandy Patty on her world tours, and then we ended up being able to go out and do some music with her on our own. But there was one day we were I think it was in Lancaster or Lancaster, Pennsylvania, however you say it, wherever you're from. And Lieutenant Colonel Oliver North had been in the news a lot because of the whole Iran-Contra hearings and everything that was going on. And I remember seeing him standing up there as a Marine, putting his hand up, taking his oath, and testifying and thinking, man, this guy was a war hero. He was from Vietnam, a lot of the different things that he had done. Just the confidence and the respect that this man carried when you would listen to him and watch him. And he was willing to lay down his life for his country. And so we got called to do something where he was the speaker. And we got to spend some time with him there at the event. And when we got done singing, the group, there was 3 of us. When we got done singing the national anthem to open this thing up, he was at a table right behind me. I mean, like, all my back was almost touching it. And when we got done singing, I turned around, and he had tears pouring down his face. He had his hand over his heart, and he looked at me, and he reached out, and he grabbed my hand and shook my hand, and he said, "Son, you can sing for the Marine Corps any day." It just meant something to me. I love history. And to have someone who will and is in the history books now, it just, wow, to be able to shake the hand of someone who was going to be in those history books, pretty neat moment. You go back and you think about different ones in history, whether it would have been like, a Benjamin Franklin or a George Washington, or it's just history. And so I'm a history buff, and it meant something big to me. But those were some of the moving moments that I watched. I think in the movie, if you haven't seen it, go see Reagan. Reagan is one of the best movies I've seen in a long time. And there was a moment in the funeral. Reagan passed away from Alzheimer's. It took about 10 years after he stepped down from president. I can remember him going on television and telling the American people that he had this disease. How painful that was for a country that really loved and adored this man. But his wife, the relationship the two of them had was beautiful. And you could see it, the way they loved each other. And he was able to love her in ways. I think a lot of us want to be able to love our wives, and she was doing the same thing. The way that she would look up at him, I mean, you could just see it. I think it's something that, as men, we long to have our wives, look at us with those eyes like, I believe in you. I see you. You can do anything that you put your mind to. I am behind you. I am not leaving you. I'm going to be here to be your emotional support. And sometimes we need our wives to be able to honestly kick our butt sometimes. When we get things out of whack, we're not seeing some things straight, we need that voice that can see us, that loves us, to say, hey, you need to take another look at this, and here's why. And Stacy's been that person for me many, many times, and I am so grateful for that. But when the funeral happened, there was a scene where, and it was the real scene, not just from the movie shot, where Nancy put her head on the casket, and she just laid her head there. And I felt it. I had tears, in my eyes. I just can't imagine the loss of a lifetime of love like that. I know I felt it when I saw, both my parents die, and I watched my mom really struggle with losing my dad. She passed away 4 months later. And it wasn't easy for any of us, but there was a love that they had, which is very, very similar. It's what I have always, longed for in my life, is they loved each other no matter what. And so many people will tell you what they saw in my mom and dad was just like fairy tale kind of stuff. Sometimes I think we beat ourselves up and we don't have a relationship maybe like that, or we have an argument and we think, well, what's wrong here? Well, we come from two different backgrounds, right? Everybody does. You have your own stories, your own way of seeing things, and so we just have to be able to stop some days when we're having those arguments and saying, where is this argument really coming from? Because we love each other. And who is it that wants to divide us? Well, it's the enemy. He hates God. He hates this love that we have, and he wants to divide us. And I think it's important that we remember when we get into these arguments, where are the things that we're stuck on, that we will not move? Where are these things coming from? Well, the enemy is the father of lies. John 8:44 identifies, Satan. It said when he speaks, there is no truth within him, for he is a liar and the father of lies. So I just want to encourage you guys, that kind of love, you can have it, but it's going to take work. And you have to remember that your spouse is not the enemy. It's the enemy, the devil, the one who tries to get between us. But so we're sitting here, it's date night, we're having a great time together, and we're going through all these moments from the movie. And I said, hey, come over here, babe, let's get a picture. We like to sometimes do a picture on date night just to kind of share it. And on social media, I was putting out, date night. We went to see the movie Reagan, and I talked about it, how good it was and everything, and I put it up. And usually if I put a post up, especially if it's something that's kind of a loving picture with my spouse or something, a lot of people are going, wow, I love seeing that kind of a thing rather than all the junk we see on social media now, and it will immediately light up. You'll get 100, 150, 200 likes on something like that. Not that that matters, but it's something that I think we need to be encouraged by, putting stuff out like that. And so I put this thing out, and I looked at it maybe an hour later, not a single like. 2 hours later, not a single like. And so I said something to Stacy. I said, I wonder, because we've seen, how when Elon Musk, bought out Twitter, because the government was trying to sway what information could be put on there or not. So he buys this whole thing to try to get freedom of speech back. And then we just hear, like this last week and a half ago or whatever it was, Mark Zuckerberg comes up and goes, yeah, we were being pressured, with what information we could or could not put up and how we would censor things. It was really interesting to hear him when Trump, was shot through the ear and how he came back up, and Zuckerberg said when he put his fist up in the air and he said, fight 3 times, Zuckerberg was moved by that. There is something when you see someone step up after someone's tried to take them out, no matter what, whether they're being, like bullies or whatever. Remember the movie Christmas Story, the little kid that's being bullied and he finally stands up for himself? I can remember watching that movie and going, that was me. I'll tell you about that in just a second. But we don't like bullies, and bullies need to be stood up to. I don't know whether this is real or not, but I saw all these motorcycle riders heading to Aurora, Colorado, after we're seeing these gangs from Venezuela, terrorizing these apartment complexes. And if this is true, and again, I don't know, it could be fake, who knows? But even if it is fake, I think people are fed up with seeing so many of these people coming across the border illegally, and now what they're beginning to do to our country. And we can't let it happen. And so we see these motorcycle gangs, going in, and if this is true, they're going in there to put a stop to this. If the government that we have is allowing it and not going to stop it, and it is tyrannizing we the people, the ones you are supposed to protect, someone has to step up. So I just want to say, pray for our leaders. Pray for those who are in harm's way, that are trying to make a difference, that have chosen to not be silent anymore, that have become a part of a resistance against evil and are willing to put their lives on the line. My hat's off to you guys. Anybody out there who is stepping up against these bullies. So back to the social media post. So 3 hours, I've changed the post like 3 times now. I called a buddy and I said, hey, I want you to look and see if you can find my post. He always comments on the stuff. He goes, I didn't see it. I had to really search on your page to find this thing. Well, you've got these algorithms. Sometimes they can happen, but when there's certain words that can be triggers, they can become censored. We saw it several years ago. And unfortunately, I really do believe we're starting to see it now. I had a friend, a lot of friends, that were putting up this post with that eagle with the American flag behind it. And it was basically saying, pray for our country and those who would do us harm. Asking God for protection. So what ended up happening is it's being blocked. Many times when you put this image up, it's being blocked and censored, and you have to click at the bottom of that image because it's being labeled as like graphic or harmful or something, and you have to get permission to view it. First time I did that, and I saw that it was this eagle with a prayer to God to protect us, why would anybody want to censor that? Karl Marx, in his Communist Manifesto, he made a comment that was like, communism begins when atheism begins. In other words, communism takes hold when God is removed. We have to pay attention to what we are seeing right now. I don't care which party you're in, pay attention. And if you're not, why not? I spent the time to watch both the RNC and the DNC because I wanted to see who these leaders are that are running for the highest office in the land. What are they all about? What are the people that support them about? What are their policies? I think it's important that we all do that. We're not doing justice to our country if we don't know who is there that we're going to be putting into office. So I changed the post 3 times, and finally, it came out, and people started, loving it and saying, hey, I saw the movie too, kind of a thing. Why'd the media put this down? It was such a great movie. And I decided to put a post up later and that night, and I said, hey, I don't know how many of you have been maybe noticing that there's some things being censored, and I mentioned some of these posts and this movie, and I didn't put the word Reagan in the post because I thought that must be the word that was being censored. And everyone started coming back saying exactly the same thing. When they tried to put this information up about this movie, it was getting almost no response whatsoever. So, if you haven't seen the movie Reagan, put it out. I'm just going to keep saying the word Reagan right now because I'm just being a little bit of a rebel here. So, Reagan, 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 Reagan. So, we don't like bullies. We never, nobody does. And there's nice bullies too. The guys that can be so nice that why would you ever, get into an argument with them? People can bully you through being really sincere, and they can be sincerely wrong. So pay attention. I think it was about the eighth grade. I think from like 8th through 11th, I was bullied quite a bit in school. My dad was a school teacher, where I grew up in the same school system. And there were a number of kids that, for whatever reason, didn't like my dad. He was a great teacher, but he was pretty strict, and I think they just didn't like it because they get busted doing stuff and get sent to the office or whatever. But I would sometimes have to find a different way home from school. Kids would be throwing rocks or different things at me. Yeah, for real. And it really was a mile to the school to my house. We didn't have a school bus that came there. So, yep, it's true. I did walk a mile each way to school every day. And I carried my instrument, and my books didn't have a backpack. No matter what the weather was, different generation. But there was this one kid that would constantly want to fight me. I never understood why. I think I do now more as I can unpack things, but I'll just kind of leave that too, because I don't know exactly what the reasons were. But one day they pushed me into the bathroom before school, and there was a bunch of kids thinking we were going to be fighting. I didn't know anything about it. And I walk in, this one kid pulls my glasses off, shoves me in there, and I'm like, why are we fighting? I grabbed my glasses back and left. I can remember being called chicken, wuss, all kinds of stuff in that moment. But I'm like, why would I need to fight this guy? I don't have anything against him. What did I need to try to prove here? He, later on that same winter, tried to bully me. We were sled riding with some friends, and was doing the exact same thing again. And so when I got home that night, my mom comes in. I'm in my bedroom, and I think this was 8th grade. I was pretty upset. And of course, moms come in and they're like, what's going on? And so she said, I don't know that your dad exactly knows what to do with this, being a teacher in that school system, how to handle this, because it happened off school property, it didn't happen at school, kind of a thing. And so my dad comes in, he's like, well, what would you want me to do? And I said, I don't know, Dad. What would you do? My dad was one of the nicest men you'd ever meet, really. He would do anything for anybody, caring, loving, kind, generous, and everyone would say that about him. But the one thing that he didn't know how to do is encourage me to step up and protect myself when the bullies of the world are coming my way. And for a kid, that can be really empowering, but you have to teach a child how to wield that kind of power. As men, and you know this, I've talked about it, I think that men, we need to be dangerous. We really need to be able to have that dangerous mentality within us. That if we are called to step up for our families, for our country, that it's like a switch, that we can be savage if we have to be. But that is very reserved and only for certain times. And I'm going to tell you a funny little story about how I taught my son about this. I've always said to my son, I want you to be dangerous, but dangerous for good, for good reasons. There's an unhealthy anger and there's a righteous anger. And so you have to know the difference and when to be able to use this strength that God has given you. So my son, he was, let me think, he was was it the 2nd grade, I think. And I had taught him something. I said, if you're ever bullied, and he had been being bullied, and that's kind of what we got into this conversation. I said, there's some things that I want you to be able to do. There's some steps you got to follow. I said, the first thing you have to be able to do is use your words. Abraham Lincoln, how do you get rid of your enemies? You make them your friends. And so I said to Garrett, I said, buddy, the first thing you have to do is you have to use your words to try to get out of this circumstance. Try to calm it down. Be kind, and maybe that will or calm the other person down. And then I said, if you've used your words and he's still bullying you, leave. Just do your best to try to get away and just diffuse the situation. But if you've used your words and if you've tried to leave, now I want you to call for an adult if you are still being bullied. Look for someone that was a teacher, whatever at the time, and call for help from an adult. And I said, but here's the deal. If you've done all three of those things, you have used your words, you have tried to leave, and you have tried to get the help of an adult, and they are still hurting you or one of your friends that you're trying to protect, you now have my permission to fight back. And here's what I want you to do. I said, when he comes up to go after you the next time, and he gets close enough, I want you to spit right in his face. My son's eyes got the size of silver dollars, and he goes, Dad, why would I spit in his face? I said, what is the first thing that kid's going to do when you spit in his face? He goes, he's going to take his hands and he's going to cover his face where the spit was. I said, that's your moment. And then I said, I want you to hit him with everything you've got. Never thinking in a million years that this would really happen. Maybe 2 weeks later. And, I grew up, I got into the martial arts toward my end of my high school years because I was bullied and stayed in it for a long time. And so I had taught my son some basic things, how to punch and how to block and, front snap kicks, things that are real quick and effective, and never thinking he would ever have to do it. It's second grade. So I'm in the studio. I'm up at Gaither Studios doing some voiceovers or vocals or something. And I come back to Burger King where I had left him with these three women. None of them were his mother. They were going to be playing with a group of kids. The Burger King, like where they have the plexiglass wall and they've got the tunnels and the balls and everything they can do back there. Well, he had been playing with these other kids and one of his buddies, it was one of the mom's sons. And I get there and Garrett is in this booth in the corner by himself. And I said to the moms, I go, why is he sitting over there? And they went, oh, he's in trouble. He's in timeout. I said, why is my son in timeout? He hurt a kid. I said, what do you mean you hurt a kid? He goes, kicked him right in the chin. And I said, that's not my son. What's going on? So I said, Garrett, come over here. I brought him over and he stood there. I said, Garrett, what happened? He said, Dad, I was playing with my friend, and in one of those little tunnel things, there's an area where it kind of opens up, and we were trying to get to the next tunnel, and this one kid who was bullying my friend, and he kept shoving him to the ground and wouldn't let us through. And then he did the same thing with me, but he kept going after my friend because his friend was a little bit smaller, and this kid was a pretty big kid. He said, so Dad, I tried to use my words. He said at that point, he wasn't doing anything any different. He said, so we tried to leave, and the kid would block any exit we had. All he wanted to do was bully us. He said, so then I started crying out for these moms, but the moms were busy doing their own thing and not paying attention. He said, so he kept doing it, and the last time he went after my friend and threw him to the ground, he came to do it to me, and I spit right in his face. I said, what did he do? He said, Dad, he put his hands over his face. I said, did you hit him? He says, no, I kicked him. He says, I kicked him right, front snap, kicked him right to the chin, dropped the kid on the spot. And I said, Garrett, you are not in timeout. You are not in trouble. You did everything you could to protect your friend. And I want you to know something. I'm proud of you. Those moments when we can speak into someone saying, do everything you possibly can first. But now you have my permission to do something different, because if what they are doing is harmful and dangerous and they are not changing and it's continuing to hurt you or those that you love, you now have my permission to stand up. Boy, don't we all need that. Probably now more than ever in our lives. But the first thing we have to do is we have to, like I said in that, we have to learn how to use our words effectively. If you do not know how to communicate with someone about something you disagree on, you guys are going to find yourself coming to verbal blows or maybe even blows. So you have to be able to know how to communicate with each other. I talked about that several episodes ago when I talked about something I made called GUIDE, G-U-I-D-E, if you remember that. I use it in my coaching when I'm doing all my coaching. It's a communication tool. It's a disarming tool that will really help in situations like this or in your marriage or whatever. You might want to go back to that episode. I think it was 2 episodes ago. But, it was really cool in the movie. Another moment that I really liked was where, Reagan, he was a kid. He was maybe 13 in this scene in the movie. And his mother sees that he's been being bullied. And she comes, up alongside him. And she's trying to, save him from being bullied anymore. And his mom takes him, grabs him by the shoulders, looks him in the eyes. And she says something like, you can run from a bully for only so long. But after a while, you're going to have to stand up to him. He goes back down. They don't show the fight, but he steps up. This kid's bigger than he is, and he stands up for what he believes, and he's tired of being bullied, and he stands up to him. Well, where can you remember Reagan as an adult, as our president, applying that same principle? Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall. Remember that? You've got the two biggest powers on earth. We had the Cold War going on. They had way more nukes than we did. And you had this, between East and West Berlin, you had this wall. I've been there. Back in 1982, I went through Checkpoint Charlie. You've got gun towers. You've got guns pointed at you. They're coming on and checking your passport and making eye contact and asking you questions, trying to intimidate you. They've got their guard dogs sniffing you. It was a flashpoint, and it needed to be gone. These people that had once been together, which were divided because of war, they kept this wall up. And Reagan gets up there and he confronts them. Tear down this wall. Peace through strength. It's something that we need now in this country more than ever. So I'm saying all this because I want you to be paying attention to what we're seeing happen. What we're seeing happen around the world, not just in this country. We're seeing things happening in England right now. What we're seeing, all the conflicts in Israel and all these different things that are happening. But it's coming home. We see all the violent protests. Protesting is fine. Let your voice be heard. You have that freedom. But you don't have the freedom to get violent when you're protesting. Use your words. Strength in numbers, being out. This is how many of us really believe this is wrong. Protest. Let your voice be heard. Vote. Get involved. Write articles. Make your posts. But the problem is, if you're trying to do stuff on social media, and those that are the gatekeepers of our society, which is the social media, and all the media that we see, if it is being controlled to where only certain points of view can be put across, we got a problem. And that wall has to be torn down. We saw Elon Musk do it. I do believe that what we saw with Mark Zuckerberg, now whether he was just afraid because he said, yeah, we went along with this censorship several years ago in the last presidential election. Maybe he's cleaning some of that up now because, I don't know, maybe he's afraid that someone's going to come after him, after the next election. But whatever it is, pray for our leaders. We were given an amazing freedom. Jesus says in John 10:10, he says, the enemy has come to kill, steal, and destroy. But I've come that they might have life, and life to the full. Now, that's not applying to this situation if you're going to go back and try to study the meaning of that. But you can draw things from that. Absolutely, that can apply. We know the enemy has come to kill, steal, and destroy. We are seeing lives being taken in this country from those who are crossing the border illegally. We are seeing theft happening like we're seeing out in Aurora, Colorado right now, where these gangs are taking over these apartment complexes. And we are seeing our country destroyed from all the back and forth fighting between Republicans and Democrats that do not know how to use their voice in a healthy way with each other. I really believe there's a lot more unity in this country than we realize. We just have to learn how to talk to one another in a healthy way. So with all that, I want to come back and remind you of Karl Marx in that Communist Manifesto when he was talking about how communism begins when atheism begins. When you take God out of our freedoms, out of our society, out of our schools, out of other things that we believe in, and you're free to not believe in God. But do not try to force that on me and take him away from me, or we got a problem. Use your words. Try to get out of a situation if you can before it gets volatile. Try to call for an adult. Think about how this even relates to Scripture. You go to the person. Then you take a witness. Then you take it before the church. Well, what does the Bible say at that point? It says treat him like a pagan and tax collector. But what does that mean? I had someone tell me one time, well, it means, like an unbeliever, shake the dust off your feet and have nothing to do with them. Well, is that what Jesus did? How did he treat pagans and tax collectors? He loved them. He sat and had dinner with them. He got into conversations with them. He loved them. I had someone make a post on my post the other day about this censorship thing with the Reagan movie. Did I say Reagan? And this woman said, we on the left are kind of wondering what's happening with this censorship thing too. I've known this person for a long time. I think highly of them. I don't agree with all their points of view, but I just came back and I said, you know what? I don't think of you as someone as being left or right. I think of you as being my friend. And that's the way we have to be able to see each other. Like Abraham Lincoln said, you want to get rid of your enemies? You make them your friends. You use your words. You have relationship. You love well no matter what. And if things get hot and heated, you begin over again. Guys, your strength is needed. We cannot be silent anymore. Choose your words carefully, but remember, peace through strength. Be confident in who and whose you are, and don't be afraid to lift up the word of Jesus Christ. He is the one who sacrificed everything he had so that we could have these freedoms and that gift of eternal life. If Christ is in you, you have the roar within, and you will have everything you will ever need. Your strength is needed. Don't be silent anymore. We'll see you next time.